Hey guys, thanks for checking this out. So we've my latest video. Hey peeps. So we've got a Thursday night game tonight. Indy at Denver. Should be low scoring, in my view. Very low scoring. But maybe Denver will finally bust out offensively. And anyway, I got a lot of information here. I'm just going to throw at you. I don't have lot of. I wouldn't say I have a lot of super duper strong opinions right now, but I'm just going to pass on some things. A lot. It might be like a data dump almost. And also, I'm going to show you one of the premium fantasy projection site I've been using. Some of the players they currently have rated higher or lower than what you might expect. Of course, I will say they don't always update things as timely until like Saturday and Sunday in particular. So some of those games, remember, there's a few days away and injuries and whatnot. So take it all with a grain of salt. But here's the current over-under most highest games. There's only 4 over 47. Another pretty low week overall. All these are around 46, over 45, 45 and a half. So the Vegas KC is the Monday night game they have projected as the biggest shootout. I suppose that's the most obvious one, considering what KC did in prime time last week. So that would probably be the safest bets if you were looking at stacking and DraftKings ReignMakers type thing. Josh Jacobs had a huge week last week, and Mahomes and Kelsey had a big week type of thing. I would say this Chargers Cleveland's an intriguing one that somehow jumps out at me. There, I could also see possibly Detroit, New England, and Seattle, New Orleans as being possible shootout games that you might want to pair up. Maybe if you're doing deep roster on DraftKings, you can do like a quarterback, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end. Hey, my dog's squeaking a toy. Quarterback. You could even do a 3 on one and 1 or 2 on the other team. And all right, give me that. You can't squeak that. My dog's squeaking a loud toy right now. Hey. And then on the individual totals, these are low as well. Sort of the likely suspects at the top: Buffalo, KC, Tampa Bay, Philly, Baltimore, New Orleans, Minnesota, Jacksonville, Chargers. I sort of like New Orleans and Jacksonville there. Possibly Minnesota. I already mentioned the LAC. I already mentioned New Orleans actually too. It's sort of stealthier ones, and also possibly the Bengals. I just noticed they're not on there. From those games, there's so many players, but so there's so many combinations. The Chargers, Cleveland. I mean, I highlighted some of the ones, and maybe I like a little better, or could be stealthier plays. Herbert, Everett, Eckler, Brissett, Cooper, Njoku. From the Bengals, Burrow and Chase, more of a kind of, he hasn't lived up to expect last year so far, so maybe he's due for a kind of game, but Higgins has been sort of the better play. Don't really like Mixon in that one. Andrews and Duvernay, I think Bateman's going to be out. Andrews sort of had a down week last week. I don't know. I always sort of like Kyler Murray and think he's a little undervalued. Dortch, I believe another guy's out there. Rondell Moore again. I'd try to stay away from Waller. They have so many weapons on Vegas. Hollins doesn't get a lot of targets, but just actually watching some of the game or highlights, he jumps off the screen. So maybe he'll earn more playing time, but there's just so many weapons there. Jacobs had a monster week last week and won me a lot, but it's hard for me to envision him having another monster week. I think Carr's a pretty good play. I should have highlighted that one. Mahomes, Kelsey. Now, Pacheco was the guy they were raving about on the Sunday night game as well. And I don't know if you remember years ago in KC when, what was his name? They had a backup running back come in. I can't even remember his name now. Dang, I should have looked it up. They had a backup running back come in for the Nigerian Nightmare, and he became like an instant star of Monday Night Football, and they basically instantly started playing him a lot. Now, that wasn't even the same coach on KC, but I do remember that happening. I could see him and Hilaire both having a good game in that. Detroit, New England, again, like an under the radar, except for not Detroit because they've been putting up points, but Zappy, if he starts again. The running backs, Harris and Stevenson, can both catch the ball, I believe, and run. Reynolds, because I think St. Brown's out again, and Jamal Williams again. From some of those other teams, New Orleans, Kamara is supposed to be okay, finally, and this could be a good game for him against Seattle at home. Both these teams have been putting up, or they've been putting up a lot of points and not playing much defense. Dalton looked pretty sharp last week, and don't forget Taysom Hill in ReignMakers. He's a tight end. He may get rushing yards, he may get receiving yards, he may get quarterback yards. But that's just a deep sleeper type. The Seahawks, again, if Penny's out, the rookie Walker could go off in a surprise one. And Jacksonville, if Zay Jones is back, could be a fairly surprise. Sort of like Davis and Singletary, but it's hard on Buffalo for me to be super confident on them. Tampa Bay, Brady and Godwin. Brady in general, Godwin if he's back. Minnesota, Thielen's been kind of quiet, putting up some numbers. And he's at home, and I feel like he scores a lot of touchdowns at home. Or he almost always scores a touchdown at home. Maybe that's just my bias. For some reason, I kind of like Green Bay. I don't know why. They're projected like a little under 25, but they got the Giants coming in, I believe, and I feel like they might start to gel a little more besides just the running. Dillon's been sort of underperforming Jones, so he might be due. And then in the passing, Lazard probably my favorite of those. I don't know why that one I like them sort of under the radar. Okay, so this site is based on DFS salaries, but on their actual projections, they've nailed some lately. They had Jacobs last week big. They had Geno Smith. They've nailed some kind of ones that you don't really think about as much. Now, again, take these with a grain of salt because they may not have updated them all properly or they may change. But they do have Miami really high. Now, this may change. I'm almost skeptical of the number, but on the other hand, I want to trust them in a way. But they have Bridgewater, Hill, and Waddle really high. And Mostert a little high. They also like Brady a lot and Fournette. They love Fournette. I believe he's their top running back over all of them. So these are guys. Now, at DFS, they like Allen and Hurts more than the public, what they're projecting. These are some guys that I just sort of are like higher than you might have expected. Dalton or Winston versus that one needs to be confirmed. But I think Dalton basically, Lawrence, Stafford, Carr, Cousins a bit, Zappy, Zach Wilson, Geno Smith, and Brissett. Like, not saying Brissett's going to put up Mahomes' numbers, but they've got him higher than you might think. On the running backs, Fournette, McCaffrey, Cook, Kamara, and Jacobs. Green means they have them projected high and higher than you might expect. Also, running backs Wilson, Herbert, Breece Hall, both Harris and Stevenson on New England, Singletary, Hines on Indy. Now, I wasn't very bullish on. I sold my rare Hines because somebody, I think, 32, 35 for it in the Denver Indy game. I sort of like Gordon, and then maybe Jackson and Lindsey for Indy, and then Denver defense and Sutton. Those are probably the only ones I would like out of that game. Mostert and Gordon, they had high. On the wide receivers, again, the Miami, I'm not really sure on that, but may have to trust them. I don't know if they still have that up there on Sunday. A.J. Brown, they had high. Hollywood Brown, Sutton, Metcalf, Kirk, higher than you might think. Some others they have pretty high, higher than you might think. Higgins, Lockett, Devontae Smith, London, Lazard, Cooper, Godwin, Garrett Wilson, Curtis Samuel, Zay Jones, Gabe Davis, and Dobbs. Also, a deep sleeper they had on Buffalo was Shakir. Maybe I don't know. I know Diggs looked a little banged up and Davis has been a little banged up, or at least 2 weeks ago. I'm not really sure. They have Knox and Shakir, probably just because Buffalo, they expect Allen to put up a lot of points and who some of his lesser targets might be. They have Higbee high and Freiermuth higher than you might expect. And Njoku and Knox as sort of DFS sleepers. That's a DFS sleeper. On defense, they have Buffalo and San Francisco the highest. They have San Francisco as a DraftKings. These are DraftKings salaries. DFS sleeper, Green Bay high. A couple more sleeper defenses or relative sleepers, they think, compared to the public, are the Rams, Tampa Bay, and Tennessee against Washington. Just real quick, I'll also show you what they have currently for the Showdown game on DraftKings, because they've been pretty good on Showdown games. I've been getting some optimizations from them, and they've done pretty well. So on the DraftKings, they basically have Sutton or Wilson as the key captain. And some of the lower salary guys they have in there are Lindsey, Boone, McManus, McLaughlin, Pierce, and the Denver defense. So if you're looking for deep sleepers to throw in there on a stack on the actual Showdowns DFS, not ReignMakers necessarily. And then on FanDuel, they have the MVP as Wilson or Sutton. So like this is in this order. They prefer Sutton over Wilson, I think. Here they prefer Wilson over Sutton, I think. But basically those two again, and the sleepers there again, Boone, McManus, and McLaughlin. Some that they're relatively bearish on, and then I'm going to wrap it up. There's like, the 30 minutes, then the game starts. I don't even know what time, 8:30 maybe? Some of the ones that are they were relatively bullish on these currently. I would say they're relatively bearish on these compared to what you might expect, or what I might expect. Maybe this is based on what I had envisioned or, type of thing. Russell Wilson, these are based on projections for the most part, all of this, not DFS salary, this part. So more ReignMakers type thing as well as this is ReignMakers. So relatively bearish. The quarterbacks aren't that many, but Wilson, Goff, Daniel Jones, and Matt Ryan. On the running backs, there were quite a few that were sort of lower than you might think. Barkley, Mixon, Chubb, Aaron Jones, Penny. There's an injury thing there. Connors, possibly Sanders, possibly Dobbins, possibly Najee Harris, Gibson, Elliott Pollard. These are obviously a little lower, but sort of meaning they don't expect these to like break out. And these would be the bigger names that they sort of don't have real high. Same thing on the wide receivers. They don't have any of these big names as high as you might think. Jefferson, Diggs, Chase, Lamb, Evans, St. Brown, injury thing, and Pittman. On the tight ends, guys that aren't as high as you may think, Waller, Goddard, Pitts, and Kittle. So sort of like relative underperforming compared to like what you might think on a fantasy points projection basis. Goff coming after like last week with the big game. All right, that's it. I know I just threw a lot, and I don't have a ton of super strong opinions right now, but the several of the weeks this year, sort of the higher scoring games on a thing like ReignMakers. Can work well. It's just there aren't that many. I mean, if you already own Mahomes, Kelsey, and let's say, or maybe Carr, because then you could do Adams and Kelsey with it, and maybe even a Hilaire type thing, or look at a Jacobs again. That one's the highest scoring game, and then the Cincy Baltimore. If you own a Burrow, you could put him with Chase and Andrews, or Jackson with Duvernay and Higgins, different combinations. On the Philly, Arizona, Hurts is still not a superstar. Murray, A.J. Brown, Hollywood Brown, that type of thing. If you want to go the bigger names, lesser names, Devontae Smith, I would say I like a little better than some of these others. And Dortch. Oh, Dortch isn't even on ReignMakers, is he? And then always, with tight ends, you can always throw in a tight end. Njoku, Ertz, Hurst, Everett, Eckler is your superstar. You could even try a Brissett, Cooper, Eckler. I mean, it depends on who you own and who's cheap. So I haven't really been buying any ReignMakers. I was so indecisive. I've only just sold the one card. Seattle, New Orleans, Geno Smith or Dalton. I think they're both expensive because the ones who are depth or things like that, there's actually less of them. That's why Garoppolo is so expensive. Kamara, Olave, if you own him, Metcalf, Lockett, Walker, deep sleeper type thing. If Penny's out. Detroit, New England. If you want to go for that one, the running backs there type of thing. Jamal Williams again. You could try the Goff Hawkinson work last week. I mentioned the Green Bay, Minnesota, a few guys I like there, Jacksonville. All right, so and again the Bills, KC, Tampa Bay, sort of like the best teams, or what are considered the best teams by people, are all projected. Especially these two are the highest. So you'll see Allen, Diggs, you'll see Mahomes, Kelsey a lot in these tournaments. That's why they're so expensive on on ReignMakers, though. Brady's kind of a good, cheaper one. Hurts is very expensive with A.J. Brown. Lamar and Andrews are very expensive. So the New Orleans would be cheaper. The Minnesota would be cheaper. The Jacksonville Chargers are still not that expensive. And Keenan Allen's supposed to be out again. All right, guys. Have a good one. Good luck on the games tonight. I should have another video up before maybe by Saturday. All right. Have a good one.